Hello and welcome back to an episode of Generation Films. My name is American Ben. We all have our own ideas of what the ideal government is. Some people believe a dictator is needed to rule the unwashed masses, others believe you need a parliamentary system to encourage compromise, and then some others, benevolent intellectuals as they are, believe that a republican democracy that emphasizes the will of the people is the only true moral way of establishing a government.
I love democracy. I love the republic.
His sincerity and optimism was so heartwarming.
Ultimately, there are many ways to skin a cat. I know, I've tried them all. And though we have come to believe that democracy is the most ethical form of government, certainly some would say it's not the most effective. Point of view and order of priorities matters a lot when having these conversations. Some would call the Galactic Empire a brutal fascist dictatorship, and others would call it a benevolent fascist dictatorship. And while some would argue that the Empire engaged in some very questionable tactics of governance, others would yet say that the galaxy most thrived under the rule of Daddy. I mean Palpatine. Anyway, let's move on. Hashtag the Galactic Empire did nothing wrong. Today I want to talk about the First Order, the body of government that rose to dominance in the galaxy following the onset of the First Order resistance war in 34 ABY. The structure of the First Order seems a bit of a truster-cluck at times, so the burgeoning Sith propaganda artist myself being a well-meaning galactic communications facilitator, I feel like I might be able to help us take a look at the makeup of the First Order power structure. What kind of government was it, and what are some examples of governments like it throughout history? First, to understand the First Order's organization, one has to understand how it came to be. Following the Battle of Jakku, Grand Vizier Masameda, the powerless leader of the Galactic Empire at its fall, signed the Galactic Concordance with the New Republic, which broke up the Galactic Empire for good. New Republic Chancellor Mon Mothma also declared all surviving Imperial officers as war criminals, and thus such Imperials fled to the unknown regions of the galaxy. One might be inclined to see parallels with World War I and World War II here, as the Galactic Concordance's mandated demilitarization of the Galactic Empire is akin to the mandates in the Treaty of Versailles that broke up the German military after World War I, and the Potsdam Declaration which broke up the Japanese military after World War II. And of course, many Nazis went on the run after World War II to countries all over the world. South America was to the Germans as the unknown regions were to the Imperials. Of course, just as post-World War I Germany rose in the shadows, angry at the harsh terms that had been exacted on them at the conclusion of the war, so too as peace spread through the core of the galaxy, remnants of the emasculated Imperial forces in the unknown regions coalesced into a militaristic hermit state under the name of the First Order. In the darkest parts of the galaxy, the First Order began to rapidly build up its military in the hopes of taking revenge on the New Republic and restoring the Imperial mandate to rule the galaxy. In the years between the fall of the Empire and the First Order Resistance War, the First Order rose as a military junta, which is a government led by a committee of military leaders. A good example of a military junta is the Government Junta of Chile, which was established to lead Chile following the 1973 Chilean coup d'etat, which saw the overthrow of President Salvador Allende, a coup that was backed by the United States. Military juntas, quite naturally if you think about it, often come to power as the result of a coup. And of course, the aim of the First Order was to overthrow the New Republic and its Jedi protectors in order to rule the galaxy. In practice, military juntas, which are intended to be ruled by committee, turn into oligarchic military dictatorships, where one ambitious leader rises above the group of military leaders running the country to become the absolute ruler. In the Chilean military junta, power was distributed among the leaders of the various branches of the military. But soon after its establishment, Augusto Pinochet, the general of the army, consolidated power, suspended the constitution in Congress, and turned himself into the dictator of Chile, dividing power between himself and his mustache. The First Order experienced a similar evolution, as the most ambitious among its leaders, Snoke, seized and consolidated power and became the supreme leader of the movement, at which point he expedited the rearmament of the Imperial forces to an even greater degree than before, and developed a military that was technologically superior to the Imperial military at its height under the Empire. So within the First Order, the supreme leader had absolute power. In that sense, it was a pure dictatorship, and the dictator had the power to amend the rest of the structure as need be. Dictatorships are always dynamic and unstable in this way. Their organization can be altered at a moment's notice. In keeping with the military might of the First Order, Snoke delegated power to high-ranking military officers and advisors. This doesn't mean that there was no time for agriculture or education policy, but that those decisions would be made by military people, and not necessarily by the most knowledgeable experts in those industries. boundaries. In the First Order, the military and the state were pretty much one. Snoke set a general creative direction for seizing power in the galaxy, and his military oligarchs were left responsible for carrying it out using their own discretion. The only time they would have been required to check with Snoke before acting would be if their plans conflicted with the general strategy laid out by the Supreme Leader. So, as we can see, there was a structure of power that was laid out by rules and rank in the First Order. But honestly, in reality, this did not accurately reflect the true distribution of power throughout its government. The truth is that title and position only got you so far in the First Order. One's real power was derived from one's proximity to the Supreme Leader. The result of such a system was that the more important one was to Snoke, the more powerful one could become. This is why in actuality, Kylo Ren, Captain Phasma, and General Hux were the most influential players under Snoke, the three forming what was known as the unofficial commanding triumvirate of the First Order. General Hux was a member of the First Order High Command, the military leadership council of the First Order, but he was significantly more powerful than his peers on the council due to his intelligence and technical knowledge. The development of the Starkiller-based superweapon was his project. Even if Snoke didn't really care for him, he needed him, and Hux reported directly to him. Thus, in a de facto way, Hux became more powerful than his military rank would imply. For Captain Phasma, it was her formidable military talents that propelled her to power. She rose through the ranks to eventually lead the Stormtrooper training program and commanded First Order forces against the Resistance. Her abilities were invaluable to a First Order that was preparing to fight a war for domination of the galaxy, and Snoke would have seen her as essential to his grand strategy. Furthermore, her closeness to Hux would have only gotten her closer to Snoke, which would have furthered her power even more. Of course, most powerful of all was Kylo Ren, who gained access to Snoke as his apprentice. In a similar way that Palpatine might not have fully trusted Darth Vader, but tolerated him because of his Force abilities, so too did Snoke need to work closely with Ren in order to maintain order through fear and to eliminate his enemies, namely other Force users. Of course, there's risk that comes with surrounding oneself with the smartest and most powerful beings. With Kylo Ren's incredible power and easy access to Snoke, he eventually did what any wholesome Sith Lord would do. He cut him in half. In a similar way, one might think here of analogies to Nazi Germany, where whoever was closest to Hitler wielded the most influence over the country. Sure, Hermann Göring, the commander-in-chief of the German Air Force, and Heinrich Himmler, the commander of the entire SS, were at the top of the Nazi hierarchy of power. But right up there with them was Joseph Goebbels, who led all Nazi propaganda efforts. Now, one might not expect one with no military background to have such a high status in World War II Germany. But Goebbels' skills in communication and his ability to exert absolute control over the news media, arts, and information in Germany made him a necessary close confidant of Hitler. This isn't a unique occurrence, of course. There's many examples of despotic regimes throughout history in which power was acquired by other means than rank alone. Along with the First Order's somewhat unclear hierarchy, their physical distribution of power was just as hard to delineate. The First Order had no capital planet, and their operations were based out of a collection of different planets in First Order territory. Of course, until it was destroyed by the Resistance, they did have Starkiller Base, an ice planet that they turned into a mobile stronghold. The base was a critical part of the First Order's military operations, as it housed entire armies and all sorts of technology, vehicles, and weapons, including a superweapon capable of destroying entire star systems halfway across the galaxy. Then, if the First Order ever had any form of a headquarters, I suppose it would have been the Supremacy, a mega-class star dreadnought that served as Snoke's flagship until it was also destroyed by the Resistance. In any case, the point is that in terms of physical setting, the First Order liked to distribute their power across different locations, and preferred to keep their centers of operations mobile. That the First Order developed in the unknown regions helped to keep their operations spread out and low profile. They had military bases and shipyards throughout these parts of space, at which they would develop all sorts of weapons, technology, and ships, all far removed from the watchful eye of the New Republic that expected the remnants of the Galactic Empire to abide by the terms of the Galactic Concordance, which called for their demilitarization. In terms of the First Order's structure, one of their greatest weaknesses was their lack of expertise outside the arena of military matters. For instance, they had no separate institutions dedicated to foreign affairs or legal matters. As far as legal matters went, there was no separation between the military and the law. The First Order's only concern was keeping order, and thus the military would exact harsh punishments, aka execution, on those who committed even the slightest infractions when it came to loyalty towards the First Order and the Supreme Leader. Stormtroopers weren't just used to fight foreign wars, but also to keep subjects in line and enforce loyalty among them. One might be inclined to see parallels with Earth-based despotic governments here. There have been many tyrannical regimes throughout the history of Earth that have committed just as much time and resources to domestic policing as they did towards eliminating their foreign enemies. The one area outside of direct military matters where the First Order might have deserved some credit was in the field of science and research. Of course, their commitment to science was driven by a desire to strengthen their armies, but nonetheless, the First Order made huge advancements in dark energy translations and developed all sorts of new weapons and technology for use in hyperspace. The First Order might have been a maniacal military dictatorship, but they actually didn't kill all the intellectuals for once. They had some of the best scientists in the galaxy, and were really where the most talented STEM majors went after college. The First Order was kind of like the cool, hip, chic Silicon Valley of the galaxy. In all, when we examine the First Order power structure, while yes, we see a vision of military might centered on an absolute dictator with power filtering down to those closest to the dictator, what we must acknowledge is that we do not yet know what would happen if the First Order was to successfully defeat the resistance and have the time and space to set up a stable empire. There would probably be lawlessness and tons of slavery and cannibalism. But it's also possible in such a scenario they could develop a more sophisticated government. That said, based on what we know so far, the First Order government was all about power, might, and military. Anyways, that's the video. Hope you enjoyed it. Definitely let me know down in the comments below if you see analogies between modern Earth-based governments and the First Order. I'll be really interested to read what you have to say. If you liked the video, please do give it a like. Remember to subscribe to our channel, hit that notification bell. For now, my name is American Ben, and I'll catch you next time. Generation Films, peace.